My name is Anna Hernandez, and I was 29 years old on the day my life quietly shattered, then rearranged itself into something startlingly better. But back then, I couldn't see any of it. Back then, all I saw was the man I loved walking away from me with a softness I mistook for sincerity. I'm an actuary. My days revolve around numbers, probabilities, and risk assessments. I once joked that if romance came with a liability clause, I'd have read it twice. But with Robert, my boyfriend of 3 years, I didn't read anything. I dove in blind. Love makes even the most cautious people reckless, and I was no exception. Robert was magnetic in the way storm clouds are beautiful from a distance, dangerous up close. He called himself a visual storyteller. In plain terms, he painted sometimes and took moody photos of cracked sidewalks and half-empty coffee cups. He believed the universe owed him inspiration. I believed he just needed more stability. My stability. The breakup happened on a Tuesday, which felt strangely appropriate. It was the kind of day no one remembers. Robert sat me down on the taupe love seat I bought in the apartment I qualified for and told me he needed space. Not distance, not time. Space. As if our one-bedroom unit and my questioning where the rent money went each month were suffocating the galaxies inside him. I feel like you're boxing in my creative process, Anna, he said, brushing his fingers through his hair the way he always did before lying. You schedule everything, even love. I bit my tongue. I didn't say I schedule things because you forget to show up. I didn't say I budget things because you forget bills exist. I didn't say I love you enough to carry us both. Instead, I nodded. Because love makes you stupid. Hope makes you delusional. He left that afternoon to recenter himself at his sister's place, leaving me with the lease, the dog, our golden mix Milo, and a silence so heavy it pressed against my ribs. For the next 27 days, I was pathetic. I can say that now without shame. I was a woman crawling through emotional mud, trying to salvage a relationship that had already died long before Robert admitted it. Day 7, I sent flowers. Not supermarket carnations, imported peonies. Robert's favorite, overpriced and delicate. Days 8 to 14. Handwritten letters. Apologies for things I didn't do, begging him to talk, to reconsider, to remember the life we built. Days 15 to 21. Grand gestures. Tickets to a photography festival he always talked about. Offers to convert the garage into a studio. Days 22-27. Silence. My final bargaining with the universe. Then came day 28. He agreed to meet. The cafe was the kind of place that tried so hard to look effortless that it circled back around to pretentious. Exposed brick Edison bulbs, $9 lattes. I got there early. My stomach churned with every passing minute. When the door chimed and Robert walked in, my heart stupidly lifted until I saw her. Tessa. She trailed one step behind him. A woman with messy hair, an oversized sweater slipping down one shoulder, and the smug serenity of someone who thinks chaos is an aesthetic. She worked at Robert's creative co-op space, another visual storyteller who believed bills were capitalist oppression. They sat down. Robert wouldn't meet my eyes. Tessa looked at me like she was doing me a favor by being here. Anna, Robert said, using the voice he reserved for emotional performance. I got your letters. They were intense. I meant every word I said, ignoring the bruise forming in my chest. I want to fix this. I bought the studio lights you wanted. He sighed, a showman preparing his reveal. That's just it, he said. You think love is fixing things. You think it's spreadsheets and budgets and guarantees. And you think love is... I looked at Tessa, whatever this is. Tessa touched his arm, claiming him, or anchoring him. We connected, Tessa said softly, but with a carefully curated softness. Long before he moved out. We didn't plan it. The energy was just there. The air left my lungs in a slow, cruel exhale. So you're choosing her, I asked Robert. I'm choosing myself, he corrected, leaning into Tessa. And she's part of that journey. There it was. The lie dressed as enlightenment. I should have cried. I should have screamed. I should have shattered. Instead, something inside me clicked like a calculator powering back on after a long outage. Numbers began lining up in my brain. Rent $2, $400. I paid 100%. Utilities $250. Mimi 100%. Groceries $500, organic everything. Me 100%. His car insurance on my plan. His phone line on my account. Streaming subscriptions mine. His credit card emergencies mine. Studio equipment mine. I looked at him, at Tessa, at the jacket I bought him draped over her shoulders, at the camera bag I financed resting near his feet. And suddenly, miraculously, I felt free. "Thank you," I said. Robert blinked. "For what?" "For telling me the truth," I said, smiling for the first time in a month. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear it." He stared confused. Tessa's confident expression wavered. "You're not angry?" Robert asked. I stood, placing a $20 bill on the table. "Angry number, Robert, I'm relieved. You just freed me." I walked out without looking back. At 11:15 a.m., I reached my car. By 11:30, I called my phone carrier. "Remove line ending in 1192. Effective immediately." By 11:45, I called the auto insurance. "Remove driver Robert Reyes." By noon, I checked my banking app. A pending charge at a vinyl shop, Tessa's influence, no doubt. I disputed it. Then I canceled the card they both used for emergencies. I went home. Milo greeted me at the door. Tail wagging, unaware his world had just narrowed to one loyal human. "We're eating steak tonight," I whispered into his fur. That night, for the first time in months, I slept 12 hours straight. Tomorrow I would face the consequences, but that night was the first breath of peace. The morning after I slept 12 straight hours felt like walking out of a storm shelter after the tornado passed. Everything was too still, too bright. Milo nudged my hand until I scratched the soft spot behind his ears, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe without it hurting. That peace lasted exactly one day. At 8 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Robert, as if the universe couldn't stand to let me enjoy a full 24 hours of quiet. He wanted to know why his phone wasn't working, why his calls kept dropping, why his data was gone. It almost made me laugh. He genuinely thought I'd keep paying for his life, after he'd walked out to find himself with a woman who treated responsibility like it was a contagious disease. I didn't answer. I went to work, made myself a coffee, and for the first time in weeks I actually focused. But he didn't stop. A second message followed, then a third, each one getting more frantic, as if the loss of his data was a personal betrayal. By lunchtime, he'd worked himself into a full meltdown at a gas station because the card I used to pay for emergencies, real ones, was declining when he tried to use it. That was the moment I finally wrote back. I kept it short, simple, and painfully clear. We weren't together. He chose Tessa, and whatever life he'd been living on my dime was no longer his to enjoy. His reply came instantly. He must have been on Wi-Fi. He accused me of being cruel, said I was cutting him off out of spite, tried to twist the logic so it sounded like I was the one who'd betrayed him. But I'd been tangled in his guilt webs long enough. This time, the truth was stronger than the history. I blocked his number. I didn't block his email yet, not because I cared, but because of the lease. I wasn't stupid. If anything was going to explode next, it would be that. Sure enough, 2 days later, he sent a frantic email claiming he'd come by to collect his winter coats and discovered the locks had been changed. Tessa was apparently freaking out, and they'd proclaimed the situation an illegal eviction. I forwarded the entire thing to Mr. Henderson, our landlord, then replied with a simple message he'd moved out a month ago, he'd left the keys on the counter, and if he wanted his coats, I'd leave them with the concierge. He was not stepping foot inside the apartment again. Apparently they didn't like that. That night, the Ring camera on my phone buzzed. When I opened it, I nearly dropped the phone from laughing. Robert and Tessa stood outside my apartment like two angry raccoons who'd been locked out of a dumpster. Tessa pounded on the door, insisting that Robert lived here, and Robert hovered behind her, looking like a kid whose mom was scolding the wrong person. I pressed the microphone button and told them the truth. They refused to grasp he lived here. Past tense. If they wanted anything else, they'd have to schedule a pickup. And then Tessa screeched the sentence that nearly made me snort. She wanted her pottery wheel. The one I bought. The one she'd used twice. The one currently sitting in the storage unit I'd stopped paying for. I told her she had 2 days before the place auctioned everything. Her face twisted in shock so dramatic it bordered on performance art. The next morning, my email flooded with messages from people who claimed to be concerned about my behavior. These were the same people I'd fed, driven home at 2 a.m., and helped through breakups. Now they were calling me petty, insisting Tessa wasn't built for stress and swearing Robert was trying so hard. I didn't respond to any of them. What could I say that math hadn't already proven? In 2 weeks, I'd saved $1,200. Milo went to a fancy groomer. I bought wine that didn't come from the clearance shelf. I sat on the couch and watched old movies without checking my phone every 5 minutes. Life for a moment tasted like something close to freedom. Then everything exploded again. I came home on a Thursday to find a piece of paper taped to my door. It wasn't a friendly note, it wasn't even neutral. It was the kind of letter that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up the building management, informing me that someone who wasn't on the lease had been seen entering and exiting my apartment. I marched straight to the leasing office. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses and looked at me like a disappointed professor. Apparently, someone named Todd had been using a spare key to come and go from my unit. He carried audio equipment, attempted to set up a recording booth in the communal lounge, and had been spotted twice, leaving with bags of groceries. Todd. I didn't know if he was Tessa's friend, ex-lover, or creative project. It didn't matter. Someone had let him in. The realization hit hard. Robert and Tessa weren't just delusional. They were strategic. They thought that because Robert's name was still on the lease, they could force their way back into the apartment. If they squatted long enough, if they created enough chaos, I might give up, move out quietly, and leave them the place while I kept paying. It was the kind of plan only people who had never paid rent could come up with. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I asked Mr. Henderson what would happen if I voluntarily ended my part of the lease and paid the penalty. He told me Robert would have 7 days to qualify for the apartment alone. He'd need to make triple the rent to stay. He didn't make enough in a month to cover a single week. The solution wasn't just simple, it was surgical. I told Mr. Henderson to start the termination paperwork. The fee was painful, almost $5,000, but it was a clean wound. Better one clean cut than 1,000 parasitic bites. I packed in 3 days. The movers came on a Saturday morning, their footsteps echoing through the hallway. Sunlight caught the floating dust in soft golden streaks, and Milo sniffed every corner like he was cataloging the memories we were leaving behind. At 11, Robert and Tessa arrived with paper bags of bagels, as if this were a brunch surprise instead of the final collapse of their fantasy. They froze when they saw the boxes. Robert's voice cracked when he asked what I was doing. Tessa's face paled when I told them I'd terminated my part of the lease. The only way for them to stay was for Robert to magically prove he made over $80,000 a year. He didn't say a word, neither did she. On Monday, Mr. Henderson called to confirm what we all already knew: Robert didn't qualify. Eviction papers were filed. I was released from everything. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I looked at Milo, curled up on the couch in my new apartment, sighed into the quiet air, and realized that peace, real peace, was finally within reach. My new apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibility. It was smaller, quieter, and didn't have the memory of anyone else's mess lingering in its corners. Milo settled into it faster than I did. Within an hour, he found his favorite spot by the balcony door and claimed it like a king, surveying his new kingdom. I envied his simplicity. I still felt the vibrations of the chaos I'd walked away from. But moving out didn't mean the chaos stopped. If anything, it intensified. The first sign came 3 days after the movers left. Mr. Henderson emailed me to confirm that Robert had failed to qualify for the apartment. He'd been given the official notice to leave. Within 48 hours, he and Tessa were supposed to pack up and go. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they would cry, blame the universe, and eventually drag their thrift store suitcases somewhere else. I underestimated their talent for denial. Late that night, after I finished organizing my bathroom drawers and sat down to eat noodles out of the pot, I checked my phone out of habit. There it was, an email from Robert with no subject line, which was always a bad sign. He wrote that the building was being unreasonable, that Tessa was too emotionally fragile to handle an eviction, that staying in the apartment was the only fair outcome given our history. He wrote as if logic could be bent into whatever shape he needed. He wrote as if I hadn't already peeled myself out of his orbit. I didn't respond. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, this time with a video sent by a neighbor from my old building. Milo was mid-stretch on his bed when he heard the sound and looked at me as if asking whether I ordered drama. I didn't, but drama apparently had my forwarding address. The video showed Robert and Tessa sitting in the hallway outside the apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes, arguing loudly enough to wake the dead. Tessa was crying into her hands. Robert paced in circles like he was performing agony for an invisible audience. The neighbor recording Mrs. Klein from down the hall, who always baked cookies but never smiled, whispered that the two of them had spent an hour insisting they weren't leaving and that the building couldn't make them. I muted the video halfway through. I didn't want to watch him crumble. I didn't want to watch her unravel. I wasn't heartless. I'd just run out of sympathy for people who made disasters and acted surprised when it rained. Later that week, I received another email, this time from the property manager. Robert and Tessa had refused to vacate after their notice expired. They'd barricaded themselves inside, using a chair under the doorknob as if they were protecting the apartment from a zombie apocalypse instead of consequences. Maintenance had to be called. Security was involved. Tessa allegedly screamed something about artists being persecuted, and Robert complained that capitalism was destroying their spiritual journey. Meanwhile, all I'd done was pay my rent and leave. I made myself tea and tried not to imagine the scene. I didn't want their chaos leaking into my new life. But the universe had a sick sense of humor. 2 days later, a stranger messaged me on social media. A woman I didn't know. Her profile picture showed her holding a bass guitar and grinning like she'd just won something. She wrote, "Hey, I think your ex's new girlfriend just DM'd me, calling me a homewrecker. I don't even know them. Are you okay?" I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to throw my phone into the nearest body of water. Apparently, Tessa had decided that anyone who breathed near Robert was trying to steal him, which was rich, considering how she'd swooped into my relationship like a seagull stealing French fries. I told the girl she didn't know me and didn't need to be involved. She apologized politely and wished me good luck, like I was a soldier heading into battle. I closed the app and inhaled deeply until the tension left my shoulders. That evening, I heard from Mr. Henderson again. This time he sounded almost tired. He explained that Robert and Tessa had been removed from the building, physically removed, after refusing multiple requests to leave. Their belongings had been packed by the staff and placed in temporary storage. They'd been escorted out the front doors, Tessa shouting tearfully about injustice, Robert muttering about creative discrimination. I listened in silence, imagining them dragging their bags across the sidewalk, Robert arguing with the world, Tessa clutching her plants and crystals like they were life rafts. When the call ended, I exhaled slowly. It wasn't joy that filled me. It wasn't vindication. It was something quieter. Something like the exhale after a long-held breath. Relief, maybe, or closure. But the universe wasn't done. A few days later, while I sat on my balcony with Milo asleep at my feet, my phone buzzed with another message. This time, a screenshot someone sent me. It was from Tessa's social media. She'd posted a dimly lit selfie inside a cheap motel room, mascara, smudged hair, tangled, captioned, with something melodramatic about struggle love and the universe testing our spirit. Behind her, the motel curtains hung crooked, and a plastic ice bucket sat on the nightstand like a sad third character in their tragedy. Robert wasn't in the photo, but his duffel bag was. I stared at it, and for the first time in months, I felt absolutely nothing. No sympathy, no anger, no satisfaction. Their life had simply become a natural conclusion to choices they'd made long before I left. I put my phone down, leaned back in my chair, and breathed in the night air. Milo shifted in his sleep, nudging closer to my ankle. The quiet apartment, the faint hum of passing cars, the wind rustling the balcony plants, it all felt earned. Still, the story wasn't finished. A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but I was waiting for a delivery, so I answered. The voice on the other end wasn't the delivery driver. It was Robert's mother. The moment she said my name, my stomach tightened, not because I feared Robert had fed her lies, but because her voice was gentle, too gentle. She asked if I'd heard from him, said he wasn't answering her calls, and admitted she was worried. She didn't ask me to help him. She didn't blame me. She just sounded tired, heartbroken even. And suddenly I saw Robert not as the man who hurt me, not as the manipulative dreamer who drained my bank account, but as someone's son. Someone who had been lost long before he reached me. I told her the truth, that I hadn't seen him, that I hoped he was okay, and that I genuinely wished her the best. She thanked me quietly and hung up. When the call ended, Milo lifted his head and looked at me, sensing the shift in my mood. I stroked his fur until the knot in my chest unwound. Their downfall wasn't mine to celebrate. Their chaos wasn't mine to clean up. Their story wasn't mine anymore. I had finally stepped off their sinking ship. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just moving away from them. I was moving toward a version of myself I hadn't met yet. The first morning I woke up in my new place without thinking about Robert felt surreal. Not triumphant, not dramatic, just quiet. A soft kind of quiet, like someone had finally turned down the volume on my life. For months, every sunrise felt like an emergency alert. Now it was just light coming through my curtains, and Milo stretching beside me, sighing like he'd carried the emotional burden of our breakup on his tiny dog shoulders. Life didn't snap into perfection immediately. Healing is less like a switch and more like sanding down a rough edge. You work on it bit by bit, and one day you run your hand over the surface and realize it's smooth. I settled into a new rhythm. I made coffee the way I liked it without worrying whether Robert would complain it was too bitter. I cooked meals for one and realized how easy it was when no one walked in saying they weren't in the mood for leftovers after I spent an hour cooking. And on weekends, I took Milo on long walks to places I'd never gone because Robert didn't like to waste creative energy on mundane activities. Freedom, I learned, is subtle. It tasted like simple things: a quiet apartment, a clear mind, a bank account that wasn't bleeding. 3 months in, I bought the fixer-upper house I'd been eyeing for a while, a small place with peeling paint and an overgrown yard, but it had a garage, and something about that made me feel oddly anchored. Maybe because I'd always wanted a project that wasn't a person. The first time I stepped inside, the floors creaked like the house was greeting me. The windows needed cleaning. The walls needed repainting. The backyard looked like nature had staged a coup. But it was mine. Every flaw, every corner, every squeaky hinge. All mine. Milo ran through the living room like he'd just inherited a kingdom. I took a week off work to focus on settling in. Every morning, I woke up early, put my hair in a messy bun, and pulled on clothes I didn't mind getting paint on. I blasted music through portable speakers and worked from room to room. It felt good to fix things, really fix them. Not patch them, not accommodate them, not try to support their creative growth. Just fix. There was a moment on the 5th day when I stood in the middle of the living room with paint on my arms and sweat on my forehead, and I thought, this is what love should feel like. Not fear of doing enough, not anxiety, not emotional acrobatics, just building step by step something sturdy. Around that time, I picked up a new hobby, or rather an old one I'd abandoned years ago. I found a vintage motorcycle frame for sale, rusty, dented, neglected, and bought it. Robert used to roll his eyes at things like that. Too loud, too messy, too industrial. But I loved the idea of taking something worn and giving it new life. I set up my workspace in the garage. I bought tools I didn't know how to use and watched videos late into the night. My hands got scraped, my arms bruised. But every time a part came loose or cleaned up nicely, I felt a spark of satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. The first time I successfully removed a dent from the fuel tank, I stared at it for minutes, lost in the metaphor. My brain wouldn't let go of, dents can be fixed. Metal can be reshaped. And maybe I could too. Months passed. Seasons changed. Milo learned to sunbathe in the backyard like a tiny retired king. I started hosting small dinners for coworkers. Nothing fancy, just people I trusted enough to sit at my new table. I didn't realize how much I'd isolated myself in my old relationship until I had someone laughing in my kitchen and noticed my shoulders were relaxed instead of bracing for criticism. Dating was a different story. I tried a few times. One date was with a guy who complained about splitting the bill. Another told me within 30 minutes that he was looking for a woman who could support his artistic vision, and I walked out before dessert. A third had potential, but when he joked about wanting a woman who would take care of the little things, something inside me shut down. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't scared. I just wasn't willing to audition for the role of caretaker again. As time went by, Robert faded into a distant memory. I didn't check his social media. I didn't think about Tessa's melodramatic posts. The world they chose was no longer my world. I wasn't interested in watching their story unfold. Let them create their own tragedies without me. Slowly, I realized the most surprising thing of all: I didn't hate him anymore. Not even a little. Hatred takes energy, and I didn't have any to waste. A year after the breakup, on a warm afternoon, I was in the garage sanding the old fuel tank again. I'd smoothed most of it, but there was one stubborn dent that needed time. Milo snored on a pile of blankets beside me, one paw twitching in a dream. The sun filtered through the garage window in soft, warm strips. The air smelled like metal and dust. My hair was tied back with a random band I'd found in a drawer. I wore paint-stained sweatpants and a tank top. I felt grounded. I felt alive. And of course, that was the moment my phone rang. Not the ringtone for family, not for work, not for friends. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated. Normally, I let unknown numbers go to voicemail, but I was waiting for a call from a parts supplier about a specific piece I needed. I wiped my hands on my pants and answered. The voice on the other end wasn't the supplier. It was a voice I hadn't heard in exactly 1 year, but one I'd once known better than my own. A voice that sounded thinner, smaller, scraped raw. "Anna," it said, "is that you?" For a moment, everything in the garage went still. Even Milo lifted his head. I could have hung up. I could have pretended it was a wrong number. I could have done anything except what I actually did. I lifted the phone to my ear and breathed in. Yes, I said, it's me. For a moment after I said my own name, the line stayed silent. Not empty, just waiting. Like the air right before a storm breaks. Then Robert breathed in a shaky inhale that told me more than any explanation could. He wasn't calling to argue. He wasn't calling to guilt trip me. He'd run out of those currencies long ago. This time he was calling because he had nowhere else to go. It's me, he repeated, voice thin enough to slide under a door. I didn't know who else to call. I leaned against the workbench, feeling the cool metal against my hip. Milo sat up fully now, watching me with that intuitive stillness only animals have when they sense something shifting. What do you need, Robert? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Not unkind, just steady. He broke. I heard it happen, the hitch in his breath, the swallow, the collapse of whatever pride he still had left. She left me, he said. Tessa, she left. The words hung there. They didn't sting. They didn't satisfy. They just existed weightless. Okay, I said, because there was nothing else to say. She cheated, he continued. With some drummer, some guy named Spencer, or Skylar, I don't even know. He let out a wet, humorless laugh. She said it wasn't cheating because they were working on something emotionally collaborative. I almost snorted. Tessa calling something emotionally collaborative was like calling a flood an accidental bath. And then Robert said, voice cracking, she took my camera, and my tablet, and the ring light. She sold everything. She said she needed the cash. His breath stuttered again. I'm at a bus station, he whispered. I don't have a place to go. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not out of sympathy, out of recognition. I remembered this exact tone. I'd lived with it, supported it, carried it. The helplessness disguised as sensitivity, the chaos disguised as art. But now, hearing it from a safe distance, it sounded different. Not like a wound, more like a habit. How long have you been there? I asked. Since last night. I've been calling people, but no one picked up. My sister said I need to grow up. My mom told me she can't keep bailing me out. He inhaled sharply. I know you don't owe me anything. I know I messed up. I know I ruined everything. His voice cracked into something small. I just needed to hear a familiar voice. I thought maybe you could let me come over. Just for a few days. While I figure things out. Milo probably misses me. I looked down at Milo. He wasn't even looking at me. He was staring at a spider web in the corner like it was far more important. Robert, I said softly, Milo hasn't looked for you in a year. There was no cruelty in it. Nothing sharp, just the truth, plain and clean. Robert didn't respond at first. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. I made a mistake, he whispered. A huge one. I see that now. You were stable, safe, smart. You took care of everything. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate you. His words should have felt vindicating. Maybe a year ago they would have. But now all I heard was someone trying to step backward in time, hoping I'd be the same woman who once wrote desperate letters and sent imported flowers. But she was gone. She had rebuilt herself one paint stroke, one sanded metal surface at a time. I'm not angry, I said, but you can't come here. Why not, he asked, pained. Just for a few days, please. Because every time I rescued you, you sank deeper. I looked at the motorcycle frame in front of me, rusted but holding shape, and every time I pulled you out, I went under. That's not fair, he whispered, but even he didn't sound convinced. It's the truth. A long silence stretched between us, thin and fragile. Not even the couch, he said quietly. Just a couch. I'll sleep on the floor. I don't know what to do. I felt a pinch in my chest. Not love, not longing, just the memory of who I used to be. The woman who would have run to him instantly. The woman who would have paid any price to keep him safe, even if it meant drowning herself. I wasn't her anymore. I'm not leaving you on the street, I said. I'm not cruel. He sniffed. Then, I'll send you $50, I said. It'll get you a meal and a bus ticket to your mom's. After that, you'll have to figure things out. He went silent. Not because he was grateful. Because he was insulted. $50, he repeated. You make good money. You can do more than that. There it was. The entitlement. The shadow of the person he'd been with me. I can, I said, but I won't. You owe me more than that, he snapped suddenly. After 3 years. Robert, I said, my voice steady as a steel line, I don't owe you anything. I heard something inside him crumble, or maybe it had cracked long before this moment, and the sound I heard was just the echo finally reaching me. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just breathed a sound too hollow for a man his age. Okay, he whispered. Send it then. I sent the money with the note final transaction. He saw it, but before he could say anything else, I ended the call. Then I blocked the number. The garage settled back into silence. Not dramatic silence, just the normal quiet of a space without crisis. Milo lay down again, curling back into his blanket, as if the world had returned to its correct shape. I picked up the sandpaper and ran it gently over the dent in the fuel tank. Slowly, patiently. The metal warmed under my hand. The dent wasn't gone, not yet, but it was smaller, softer, almost smooth. Dents can be repaired. Metal can be reshaped. People too. But only when they want to be. I worked in the soft afternoon light, breathing steadily, feeling more like myself with every pass of the sandpaper. Milo snored softly. The air smelled like dust and possibility. Some stories don't end with grand gestures or revenge or reconciliation. Some just end. And that's enough. When I finally set the sandpaper down, the fuel tank caught